Mastering a hip hinge movement like the Romanian deadlift takes a lot of patience and a lot of practice. The first method I use to teach the hip hinge is to start half a foot away from the wall and focus on only driving your hips back until your butt touches the wall. From there, take a small step forward and repeat the process. The goal is to touch the wall without bending your knees. Continue this process until you get to a point where you can no longer touch the wall without either coming off your toes or bending through your spine. If your hip hinge still looks like this with too much flexion through the knees, the second method I like to use is to step in front of a bench, making it almost impossible to bend through the knees and instead forcing you to break through the hips and load the hamstrings. When moving on to a barbell or a dumbbell Romanian deadlift, start the repetition by actively pushing your hips back behind you while you keep your chest up. Your goal is to keep pushing your hips back behind you until you reach your hamstrings full length in position, and then you can come back to the top. The key here is to find that full length in position without rounding through the spine and without overloading through the lumbar. As you can see here, you can also do this with dumbbells and follow the exact same principles. Some common errors we see with the Romanian deadlift is number one, going too low and rounding through the spine, placing undue stress on the lumbar. Number two, letting the weight drift out in front of you, again placing too much stress on the lower back. Number three, rounding through the spine and not loading the hamstrings. And lastly, executing the concentric phase of the lift by utilizing the lower back as opposed to loading the hamstrings and glutes. Once sufficient strength has been built in the movement pattern, you may find that grip becomes a limiting factor. So utilizing straps like this can be a good move for really heavy sets. So from start to finish, if you're starting from the floor, make sure you've got the hamstring length to be able to do this without rounding your back. If starting from a rack position, drive the hips forward and then take a step back so you can start from the top down position. Actively drive the hips back while simultaneously keeping the chest up. A good cue to use here is think about someone tying a rope around your hips and pulling you back from behind. On the way back up, think about someone standing in front of you with that same rope and pulling you forward from the hips. Ensure you keep your back straight throughout the entirety of the lift, keep the arms long, and even weight distribution through the heel, big toe, and little toe.